even now, I remember that one must never set foot upon the first, second, seventh, or eighth step. The left side was reserved for the chosen. An opposing outdoor staircase led to the very entrance. It would have been more proper to call it symmetrical, but as I never once walked the right-hand side, its presence in my memory is merely vestigial. It simply does not exist there. Instead, there is something queer, governed by a dreamlike geometry, where instead of steps leading down, there lies an illogical precipice. Perhaps that area became so after a lad from my courtyard stepped upon the eighth stair, only to be hauled down by his scruff by one of the older boys. The act itself was, in its depth, purely ritualistic. Much as the Spartans cast sickly infants from a cliff, so too was he sent on a one-way journey. From that day forward, I shunned the right side even after the MK Club closed its doors and a stationer's shop took its place. I first learned of the Mortal Kombat Gaming Club when I was 7 years of age. I first beheld it while seated in a barber's chair. It seemed to me that the establishment itself alluded to something magical, perhaps the sorceress or the fairy tale. The interior comprised 2 rooms. To the left lay the club, adorned with a small sign bearing a dragon and the letters MK. To the right was the barber shop itself. Sitting in my chair upon an extra wooden plank, I watched crowds of boys pass into that room. They would all cast off their shoes and vanish into the darkness of the chamber, from which mesmerizing sounds drifted, leaving nothing before my eyes but dozens of pairs of footwear, left abandoned at the club's threshold. Roughly a year later, I went there alongside my friends from the courtyard and learned the main rules. Never, under any circumstance, step upon the first, second, seventh, or eighth stair. Never enter the club whilst wearing shoes. And never, no matter what may occur, play with the Redhead. Whilst the third rule was self-evident enough, I came to grasp the essence of the first 2 through that very same vivid example. When the older boys hauled the lad from our courtyard down by his scruff from the right side of the staircase, upon the second and eighth steps sat those who ventured out for a smoke. The second belonged to the youngsters. Sitting there, they would spit upon the first. The eighth was reserved for the elders, who, while smoking, spat upon the seventh. Yet, as to why one must never play with the Redhead, no matter the occasion, that I could not fathom. Moreover, for a long time I found myself sincerely curious. Who, indeed, was this Redhead? As for the other older boys, those who would lend us a bit of pocket money, teach us the proper way to play, or take hold of a joystick merely to show off a few tricks, I remembered their faces and names instantly. What vexed me, however, was that in the year and more that I frequented the place, I never once had the misfortune of seeing anyone known as the Redhead. And you know how it goes. All proceeds normally, and absolutely nothing happens. You become acquainted with those in the club, and others begin to recognize you. There even comes a time when one of the older boys is prepared to stand up for you should some interloper prevent you from playing in peace. The gaming club becomes a second home, possessed of its own vibrant and bustling life. At times, when very few souls are present, Auntie Stella does not always insist that the game be ceased once the hour has passed. If the club is filled only with regulars, she seldom emerges from her little booth. There, she reads some faceless detective novel or dozes quietly. That vast expanse of memory is overflowing with an indescribable sense of warmth and conviviality. I recall all those instances when someone's socks would surely reek, and they sat with their feet encased in plastic bags purchased from a nearby stall. There were all the jests of the older lads, such as, "Good heavens, lad, look at those fine pedals," Or let us draw a Nike mark upon the side for you. I believe there was even one fellow to whom they eventually drew a Nike sign with a marker upon his bags. It seems even the older boys feigned offense when, at the end of the day, he removed them before donning his own shoes. Little one, you've cast away such fine trainers, the latest collection. On several occasions, there were episodes where mothers and fathers would burst into the club, and with cries of, "There you are, you little scoundrel," they would haul their children away by the ears. In those moments, like beasts scavenging upon scraps, someone would immediately pounce upon a joystick that had fallen to the floor, finishing the remaining time with a sort of primal ferocity. As autumn approached, the older boys would drink cheap spirits and enter the club merely to warm themselves. The large glass window to the left of the entrance would fog up quite quickly, and those waiting for their turn would leave messages there with their fingers. Onyx and nearby, a fool and his money are soon parted. Minor champion, and beside it, a crooked diving into concrete. Anyone listening to Bonfunk MC dresses like a femboy. Only one message did not have a funny comment added to it. Redhead. That word seemed separate from all the others, as if the very finger that wrote it had been covered in filth. After an hour, the windows looked as though they had been splashed with water, and most of those funny messages were hidden under hundreds of tiny streams of condensation. Only one message remained clearly visible. Redhead. It could still be seen a week later. The dirty streaks did not go away. Auntie Stella tried to scrub it off more than once. The cloth did not help, nor did her angry swearing. We simply tried not to look at it, until eventually, the writing finally disappeared. I have many more mixed memories, though I likely cannot put them in chronological order. In some, it is summer, in others it is spring. Most of them cover my first 3 years of school and various seasonal holidays. I only remember how, during that short time, several generations of regulars passed through the MK Club. By the time I was in 5th grade, no one sat on the steps to smoke anymore. None of the newcomers knew the rules. Everyone was already stepping on the 1st, 2nd, 7th, and 8th stairs, and people were allowed to enter the club wearing shoes. And no one, except for me, remembered that no matter what happened, you must never play with the Redhead. At the same time, a boom of computer clubs arrived in the city, and the old console clubs slowly began to die out. In MK, there were no longer huge queues. No one crowded at the entrance or on the street to give advice on how or what to play. No one offered to play Frogger or Street Racer. All of them had vanished. They had moved to the computer clubs, where they were reborn in a new, more complex form. Yet for some reason, I continued to go to MK regularly to play on my Dendy or Sega, even though I already had a PlayStation at home by then. My parents and my friends from the courtyard did not understand why I did this. Starting in the 3rd grade, my schoolwork went to ruin, and I only escaped failing the year by a miracle. For a time, my teachers tried to convince my parents that I was slow in my development, and they suggested moving me to a special class. All my classmates found out about this, which made me feel deeply disgusted. Even when I knew the answer during a lesson, I would try not to speak, so my classmates wouldn't see that I actually cared. They wouldn't see that I was making an effort or trying to be one of them. Around the 5th grade, I began skipping school to sit in MK until the lessons were over, playing my favorite games in total solitude and silence. At school, the teachers often called me out in front of the whole class, telling me they wouldn't even hire me as a janitor. Because of this, I had no desire to go there at all. It was then, in late September, that the club lost one television, and after another week, only 5 were left. I remember watching the club vanish before my very eyes. The large shelf of cartridges grew empty. The stools and small tables were carried away, and the posters were taken down from the walls. They dismantled everything, even the little booth where Auntie Stella always sat. All that remained was a single television with a Sega connected to it. It seemed to be the end of October, perhaps even the 31st. I cannot remember exactly. In the morning, my class teacher said she had called my father into the school, claiming she could no longer tolerate my skipping classes. This meant that my father would likely be asked to withdraw my documents. My heart felt heavy with a sense of dread. There was the closing of my favorite club, my hatred for school, my absences, and the serious consequences coming my way. It all felt so unpleasant and overwhelming that I simply could not take it. I grabbed my things and left after the first lesson. I went straight to MK, knowing that today would be their very last day. And, as always, following a rule that was no longer necessary, I did not step on any of those stairs. There was no one in the club itself. On a small table sat the only TV left, which was showing the news. Several bags, stuffed full of things, stood on the floor, and Auntie Stella was the only person in the room. She was filling out some papers and making lists of what was inside the bags. According to her, they were coming in an hour to take down the sign above the entrance, after which the MK Club would cease to exist forever. She was surprised by my arrival and said with a bit of annoyance that she had already packed away all the cartridges. Seeing how lost I felt, she looked even more discouraged. I do not know what she was feeling at that moment. Perhaps she felt the same as I did. After looking at me for a moment, she gave a small smile and reached into her bag. She pulled out a Sega, tangled in wires, and connected it to the monitor. Then another miracle happened. From her bag, she pulled out a cartridge with a little green man wearing a black mask. I could not believe my eyes. Boogerman. And I was so happy I could hardly breathe. Auntie Stella noticed this and told me that I could play for 1 more hour until they arrived to take the sign. She needed to step away for 10 minutes and asked me to keep an eye on things. She said something else, but in my joy, I did not really hear her. The familiar music began to play, and the little green man crawled out of a toilet. Behind my back, the bell of the entrance door chimed, and Auntie Stella left. Even now, I remember my thoughts in great detail. How I wanted that hour to never end. I simply wanted to be there. I wanted to stop time or just vanish. I did not want to go home and face a new day filled with classmates who always had their homework done and found school so easy. I did not want to listen to my parents' arguments at home or their talk about my future. I knew that because of my absences, my parents would likely be asked to withdraw my documents. The class teacher had mentioned this more than once. Even now, I remember my thoughts in great detail. How I wanted that hour to never end. I simply wanted to be there. I wanted to stop time or just vanish. I did not want to go home and face a new day filled with classmates who always had their homework done and found school so easy. I did not want to listen to my parents' arguments at home or their talk about my future. I knew that because of my absences, my parents would likely be asked to withdraw my documents. The class teacher had mentioned this more than once. All of this together made me experience every pixel on the screen, as if it were the very last of my life. It seems I never even pressed start. I just sat before the monitor, staring blankly at the screen. Then the screen went dark for a second, and I saw a silhouette standing behind me. It was a boy in a cap, who looked several years older than I was. He introduced himself immediately. His name was Michael. With a sigh of frustration, he said, "Damn, I love this game. Looks like it's frozen." And then he walked over to the Sega, pulled out the cartridge, blew on it, and put it back in. Nothing happened. The boy took off his cap, scratched his fair head, and put it back on. "Listen, I know something. Do you want me to show you the most amazing game in the world?" he said. Reaching into his jacket pocket, in his hands appeared a Sega cartridge that looked very different from any I had seen before. It was metallic, with a title that looked as if it were made of weld seams. Instead of a word, there was a complex symbol where many lines intersected. "You're going to be blown away. This is the coolest game in the world, I promise." "Look," the flashing word Sega appeared on the monitor, and then, blinking, it began to crawl downward until it disappeared. For a second, it felt as though the word had crawled out of the monitor and started moving across the floor. I looked down, but at that moment, Michael shouted enthusiastically again, "Press start, press start." There was no intro on the screen and no music played. There was only the black word "start" against a white background. After hesitating for a second, I pressed it, and the game began. Black and white clouds appeared on the monitor. They moved very slowly and seemed to grow darker. Then lightning flashed across the screen, thunder rolled, and it began to rain. At that exact moment, the same thing happened outside our window. The sky darkened, there was a flash and a clap of thunder, and then the rain began. Look, it's going to get even more thrilling now. Immediately after the intro, a boy appeared on the screen standing outside. Visually, as far as the pixels would allow, he looked suspiciously like Michael. Around him were houses, people walking by, and cars driving past. Seeing him, Michael was delighted and asked, "Give me the joystick." "I'll show you a trick." While taking the joystick off my hands, he began pressing a combination of buttons, after which the boy on the screen flew down through several levels. When the character landed, Michael handed the joystick back to me and said, "Well, what do you think?" What was happening on the screen felt terrifyingly familiar. This pixelated boy was standing next to a small boy sitting in front of a monitor. A boy I began to recognize as myself. What I saw made no sense to my mind. "Take it, go for a run. There are so many tricks. Look there, in the corner on the right, see? There's a joystick there. It's a secret one." The pixelated boy on the screen had a very noticeable red head. I remember being terribly frightened. My mind felt like it was turning upside down, and I involuntarily began glancing at Michael sitting to my right, at his hair. It wasn't red, but I was still scared. I don't want to." Michael laughed and took the joystick from my hands. The boy on the screen came to life, ran to the corner of the room, and picked up the secret joystick. After that, Michael stood up, pulled the cartridge out of the Sega, quickly shoved it into his pocket, and said, "Don't be such a coward. Come over to my place instead. I have a notebook at home with tons of cool combinations. I'll give it to you." "To me, yeah. I don't mind. What kind of combinations?" "I'll show you outside. I promise you won't regret it." "Come on, I'll wait for you out front," Michael said, and he dashed out the door. A minute later, Auntie Stella came back in. She had managed to get soaked in the rain and was not in the mood for company. I tried to say a proper goodbye to her, as the MK Club meant a great deal to me, but no dramatic farewell could be made. After thanking me, she immediately began disconnecting the console and stuffing it into one of the bags. In the hallway, they were already taking down the sign above the entrance. Stepping out the door, I turned back one last time and realized the MK Club had just died before my very own eyes. Oh, there you are. What took you so long? Let's go. Michael was standing under the overhang outside, right by the entrance. I think I'll just go home. Besides, it's raining, I said, as I didn't much feel like going with him. Come on. Why would you want to go home? He said, pulling the joystick from his pocket. Look. He began pressing long combinations on the joystick again, and then in a single second the rain stopped. Well, what do you think? He asked, looking quite pleased with himself. I'll show you so many more tricks. I have a whole notebook at my house. I'll give it to you. But why go home now? Let's walk around first, and then we can head to my place. I have plenty of cartridges and a very rare console that is even better than a PlayStation. I was stunned by his manipulation of the joystick, and after struggling with myself for a moment, I agreed. Look, I live not far from here, but we won't go straight to my place. Let's wait a couple of hours until it gets dark. In the meantime, let's head to the bus stop and have some fun. There was a crowd of people at the stop. Michael seemed to be looking for someone specific, and then he said, Look, check out that old man with the yellow bag. At the same time, he pulled his joystick from his pocket and began pressing another combination. The old man walked a few meters, and then his bag tore, sending 3 tomatoes rolling across the ground. Michael snorted with laughter and said, That's not all, before pressing yet another combination. As soon as he finished, the tomatoes turned into tiny red balls. The old man stared at the red balls in confusion, turning them over in his hands, trying to understand what they were. Michael laughed again. Then he turned his gaze toward a stout woman carrying a brown handbag. Watch this. You'll die laughing. Another combination on the joystick, and the woman instantly screamed, throwing the moving handbag away from her. About a dozen people noticed, and then one brave soul approached the bag, picked it up, and began to slowly open it. He recoiled almost instantly as a chicken, squawking and shedding feathers, flew out of the bag. The woman let out a shriek of surprise, which brought Michael genuine delight. Oh, see that girl with the stroller? Hang on, this one's a complex combo. Michael began tapping out another combination known only to him. Then he froze and stared intently at the girl. She was rocking the stroller and looking out for a tram, paying no attention to her child. Michael even frowned and began pressing a long combo again when suddenly an inhuman scream rang out across the entire street. People began approaching the girl and peering into the stroller. They looked inside, then frowned and pointedly walked around her, giving her a wide berth. Let's go have a look too, Michael said, heading toward the stroller. He reached it much sooner than I did. He glanced inside and immediately began to smile. There was a plastic baby doll. I must admit, I expected to see anything there except an ordinary doll. The girl, clutching the stroller, was literally gasping from the sudden surge of horror. She could no longer speak or scream. Michael pulled me away by my hand. A very unsettling feeling began to grow within me. I think I understood everything then, and when he let me go, I followed him of my own accord, and the longer I continued to follow him, the more gruesome and twisted his combinations became. Look, see that woman in the window? Check this out. I was absolutely terrified. Another combination, and a dark silhouette appeared behind the woman. He stood behind her back while she continued to look out at the street. Then he grabbed her and dragged her into the depths of the apartment. For a few seconds, only the curtains swayed in the window. Noticing my terrified reaction, Michael was not satisfied. He performed another combo, and in place of the window, there remained nothing but a solid brick wall. We passed by some kind of monument. He pulled out his joystick, performed his manipulations, and dozens of muffled moans began to sound from within the monument itself. And I just kept walking and walking after him, afraid to say a single word. Before long, we had moved quite far from the city center into the residential outskirts. It began to grow dark, and as the sun went down, Michael became silent. For some reason, he only occasionally repeated, "Soon we can go to my place." But he said it as if he were afraid of forgetting, or perhaps just trying to soothe himself. Along the way, I heard him tapping out another combination on his joystick, though nothing happened after he finished it anymore. He walked ahead of me. In the dim light, his hair began to look strangely unnatural and bright. Then he pressed another combination, and it looked normal again. "Almost there, it's close now." At times, his voice became creaky, and his footsteps sounded like shuffling. Then he would pull out the joystick again, and then I smelled a foul stench. Michael made an effort to walk faster. His fading voice repeated, "Come to my place, just a little bit." The stench became more unbearable, and his speech merged into a single stream of chaotic bubbling. And then we finally arrived. It seemed to be the side of a 4-story, unfinished brick building. Michael suggested that I go down with him, but I refused. An open door led into a tiny, shallow, semi-basement room. A powerful stench of rotting meat hit my nostrils. Michael stood with his back to me, to the right of the door, constantly turning away. He was trying not to look in there because he knew what was there, and then I saw it too. A tiny, rotten body with an unnaturally red head. There. All the combinations, they are in the notebook. Take it. And your joystick. Go in. She is right there. To the side, she is all yours. Michael's hair beneath his cap began to turn red again, and his legs began to buckle. He was crumbling before my eyes. Go in. There. Take her. There is the notebook, with all the combinations. She is yours now. He kept speaking, and I could still hear him pressing and pressing his buttons. He barely had enough strength left to press them, and then his entire body simply went limp, and the joystick fell downward along with bits of flesh and clothing. Only then did I see where the wire from the joystick led. Beneath his clothes, it went into his very body, into his entrails. For every trick he performed, the Redhead spent a piece of himself, until nothing was left. And only then did I understand what he truly needed. That strange black mass in the room, upon which the rotten body with red hair lay, was not rubbish or filth after all. It was a collection of bodies, which it had been feeding upon. Along with this, I spotted something else inside the small room. There was a sign from the gaming club. Mortal Kombat. A dragon with the letters MK. It lay behind the body with the unnaturally red hair, looking like a tombstone. With my foot, I kicked the joystick lying at the entrance toward it. It landed not far from the Redhead. As soon as it reached that spot, the doorway began to close up until, before my eyes, there was nothing but a brick wall. It is difficult to remember how I made my way back, and nothing good awaited me at home. Until the end of my school years, I continued to be the worst student in my class. However, deep in my soul, I believe that on that day, life gave me its own personal exam, which fortunately I did not fail. The rest is somewhat unimportant. I do not think anyone would be interested in reading about what I do for a living now, or how, by some miracle, I am even still alive. For several times I have tried to find that place, and I cannot tell myself why. All that remains of that passing time is the barbershop where I still get my hair cut to this day. It is still there, next to the stationer's shop that stands where the MK Club used to be. Even now, when I go there, I walk up the left side. Even now, I step over the first, second, seventh, and eighth stairs.